Welcome back to Wealth Fact. Today I want to talk about something that sounds simple. It's why people don't take financial advice they're given. Even if it's good advice, free advice, people don't actually use it the way it's intended to. They don't just not understand it. They don't just misuse it. They don't use it at all. Over the years, I've tried to help people in real life, whether it be friends, acquaintances, people I care about, or people I barely even knew. I've offered to sit down and explain things slowly, walk through numbers, answer any question they had, talk about risk, time horizons, practice, everything that actually mattered when it comes to financial literacy and the execution of it. And I never charged for it, and I always continuously offer it. And I wasn't selling a course, I wasn't pitching anything. I genuinely wanted to help them just because I enjoy sharing information so much. But the surprising part to me was that all of these conversations, all these offers, and all these explanations, only one person really listened to me and they followed my advice in a meaningful way. That alone tells you something about the behavior of people when it comes to finances. And that person that took my advice didn't simply just improve their situation a bit. They didn't get more organized or saved a few $1,000s. They ended up making a couple $100,000, which is like real money, actual life changing money for most people. And even then, they didn't follow my advice all the way through. They stopped short, they pulled back pretty early, but they stayed far enough along that their outcome changed their whole life. And even after years, they thanked me for helping them out. But I told them that they were like the only person that actually listened to me when I was younger. And in most people's eyes, I was just a kid talking about investments, opportunity costs, and long term thinking. And most people didn't take my opinion seriously. And honestly, I wouldn't have either. Even that I'm older and more experienced, people barely take my opinion beyond what I expect them to, simply because it doesn't come from a source that's popular. They still see it as skeptical in nature. And I don't blame them. That's how we all are. Even me, I don't really take advice from anyone directly. I take it in as an opinion and definitely analyze it, but never blindly follow through with it. And this is what stuck with me with other people's belief, that their mindset was stuck on that they wanted to learn about financial advice and wanted to receive it, but never actually followed through it with it. They just wanted to say they received it or say they got the help, but never actually did anything with it. And I've explained investing to friends even years ago, and it wasn't a very abstract way. I think it was very down to earth and very practical. I would tell them this is why this matters right now kind of way. And I'd use a lot of metaphors. This person was really smart and was at the top of the business school with me. And it was someone who studied finances academically with me. Well, I studied accounting, but similar enough. And we took the same classes, or we took similar courses. We learned about all these interests, long term returns, financial tools, planning ahead, all these like advanced business concepts. And after I finished explaining why we should be investing early, they looked at me and said, why would I invest my money if I can go enjoy it today? And I just stood there shocked. Not because the question was dumb or anything, but because of how honest it was. And I knew people thought this way. But to me, it was, we're business students. We're at the top of our school. We've taken these classes. We understand the time value of money. How could you respond like this? And that sentence perfectly captured the conflict that lives inside so many people. On one side, they know what is a smart move. And on the other, they feel something else entirely. And that feeling usually wins their options. And it wasn't about like ignorance or lack of education. It was a conscious choice to prioritize present entertainment and enjoyment over the possibility, not guaranteed, of future stability. And that mindset wasn't unique. I think it represents most of our generation right now as they optimize for experiences today and worry about the future once it comes later on. And years have passed since then, and that person now has told me that they regret it, and not in a dramatic way, not with tears or like a panic. I think it was more of a just staring into the wall, quiet, like deep thought realization that they finally understood that they couldn't go back. They can't catch up to the money they would have been making by then. That every year you didn't invest, you could never get back. And I think that's how most people will start learning it now eventually. So why didn't they take the advice back then? And why don't people take my offer to help even now? I think it comes down to psychology. When we're young or when we feel young, we prioritize living, experience, feeling alive, seeing the world, and that's not a wrong way to live. And there's nothing like inherently wrong with enjoying your life for your own experiences. Everyone gets to define what fulfillment looks to them, especially at an early age. Some people want to travel, some want freedom, others want to build companies, and others just want a simple life that's peaceful. And those type of lifestyles aren't universal to anyone around the world. They're all defined differently, especially depending on the country you were raised in, born in, neighborhoods, everything. And the thing is, though, that most of us are going to live much longer than we expect or plan for. I think I've seen most people live like they're gonna live until their mid to late 30s or 40s. Like anything beyond that point is a vague extension that will eventually work itself out as you grow older. Just like most of us as kids thinks adults can solve all of our problems when honestly adults struggle with everything. And that's the reality of the average person spending decades living with the consequences of their decisions they've made in their 20s and even early 30s because that's still young nowadays. Those early years are the easiest time to build something small and be able to grow it without actually putting too much effort in afterwards. And it won't be a massive amount of money or wealth, nor would it be guaranteed or in a real successful way that most people would see online. It just starts off as a like a foundation for a portfolio or even a safety net, just a little something to make sure you have to live for the rest of your life and you're not just stuck working or even worse in a really bad situation financially. And we're living in a culture where people want the dopamine hit now rather than later. They prefer to spend it all now and see the rewards visibly or experience it right away. Since social media constantly shows us people traveling nonstop, staying at luxury resorts, driving exotic cars, getting pampered at spas, really living the life that we see all around social media. And what we don't really see about them is the debt, the stress, or even the fragility of their financial situation, that any small hit will knock them out. And they'll probably stop posting or start faking these posts just to keep up the image. And most of us today are more in the idea of financially impatient, where if we see something we can afford, we start to think about it. When we see it above our budget, we think, oh, we'll just cover the rest with a credit card or the whole thing with credit and we'll like deal with the consequences later. And it's not just about the enjoyment, It's about how we said earlier, about signaling to other people that we're doing well, that we're happy, that we're successful, even if it's really for a moment. That's why most people buy cars they can't even really afford to drive. That costs more. That costs about half of what they pay in rent or mortgage. That's why you'll see someone driving a luxury vehicle while renting and not owning their own house, living paycheck to paycheck, and having no real emergency fund or path for their future. People will argue that cars are cheaper than houses, but that logically, financially makes no sense, especially if your car is worth like under $100,000, like no luxury car. From a financial standpoint, getting a mortgage, buying a house is more of an investment than buying a really nice car. It helps you build equity, it's sustainable, it's more predictable. And a car always depreciates, it consumes cash, depends on expensive maintenance, and is really just a status symbol. And houses do cost money. They come with responsibilities, commitment. They tie you down. And most people don't want that weight on them, especially nowadays if they want to travel, not sure if they want to stay in the location they are. They want that flexibility, even if the flexibility is an illusion. So they choose what fits their personality now and what looks good now rather than what they think will be a better decision for them in the future. And this creates a dangerous pattern. People rather appear wealthy in short glimpses of life than build actual wealth. They don't want to be seen in something cheap. They don't want to say no to a dinner or a vacation. They don't want to miss out on these cool events, raves, parties, locations around the world. They don't want to feel like they're falling behind socially. They're fine with this because the consequences are delayed. They don't show up next month. Maybe they don't show up next year. They'll probably take years, 5, 10, 15 years later when the consequences of all of these expenses come up later on. And for someone living day to day, 5 years seems unreal. It doesn't feel urgent enough to start changing behavior today. And there's another layer to this that people don't often talk about is that criticism, is that financial advice feels like criticism. When someone's talking to you about your savings, your investing, many people don't hear it as help. They hear it more as a judgment of what they've done wrong their whole lives. They hear someone pointing out their spending habits, their past mistakes, their life choices. Even if the advice is given in good intentions and in good faith, it can still put people off and in a defensive position, just start justifying everything and not accepting it. Okay, this is exactly what happened. And once they start doing that, this defensive behavior, they stop listening and everything else afterward just goes out the door. And we all inherently fear criticism, especially when it comes to touchy decisions that we've made in the past. Nobody likes admitting that they were wrong. Nobody wants to accept that something they enjoyed might have not been worth it at all. But responsibility doesn't mean never making mistakes. It just means going forward with it anyways. Even if it was bad, you just forget about it, right? You just go for it. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it hurts your ego. And that part does hurt people once it hits their ego. And this brings us to basically how it is. Most financial advice isn't really about the money. It's about the humility, the acceptance of your past, present, and even your future. You'll have to accept that you really prioritize the past by living in the moment and forgetting about your future. And the people who understand that early don't just end up with more money, they end up with more options and control over their time, with more freedom at an earlier age rather than having to retire at what is it now, like 62 and a half or something like that, you'll be able to retire depending on your speed at your own level as much as you would want it. That's how early you would be able to retire if you actually put in all the effort and take, whether it be advice from someone online or to actually start taking courses for it. And that's why most people don't ignore financial advice because it's bad or just not good enough or customized to them. They ignore it because it tells them they've been wrong their whole life, and they need to change now. And that change makes their ego hurt, and it makes them feel like they can't live anymore. And that's the hardest advice they'll ever take, to finally decide to change their habits and honestly their personality to be more stable in the future that isn't even guaranteed. And I think if you're listening to this, you'll probably be more willing than most people to actually change that behavior, to change yourself, to actually imagine a possible future that isn't at 52 when you're seeing the world, but much earlier and at a much calmer pace. Thank you for listening.